a message I'd like to share with you here today. The title of this message is called All the Small Things. All the Small Things. And if you're old like me, then you'll know that this is a song reference. All the Small Things. There was a band called Blink 182, rock band, and they used to sing this song, All the Small Things. Let's go into the text for today. For 2 Kings chapter 5, we're reading from verse 1, and we're going to read all the way really until verse 14, and we're going to break those things down, and I'd like to share with you some things that God has been showing me. But we're going to start with verse 1. Verse 1 tells us that the king of Aram had great admiration for Naaman, the commander of his army, because through him the Lord had given Aram great victories. But though Naaman was a mighty warrior, he suffered from leprosy. Right, so from the onset of the passage, you're introduced to a great man, a man called Naaman. And he's rich, he's powerful, he's respected, he's successful. So you can think in your mind, somebody that's great by modern day terms, right? Maybe some world leader, maybe some CEO, maybe some kind of celebrity. Naaman would be a person that fits into that same category. He will fit into the same category as Tim Cook of the tech world. He will be along the same lines as Warren Buffett in the finance world. He will fit along the same categories as Kevin Feige in the movie world, or maybe BTS in the K-pop world. Right? He will fit into the category of all these kind of great people that are doing great things, because Naaman, we find, is a really big deal. Right? He's good at his job. He's won many victories for the king of Aram. And so you have a person that's incredibly successful. Right? Incredibly successful. The irony of the whole thing is that greatness has a problem with no solution. Naaman had a problem. He had leprosy. Leprosy is a horrible skin disease, right? It's a disfiguring skin disease. It will cause patches to appear in your skin. It's going to change your skin texture. It numbs your nerves so that when you get injured, you can't even tell. You don't even know. And when that happens, you get infected. And some people lose limbs that way because of some kind of infection. Right? The worst thing is that leprosy is incurable. There was no known cure for leprosy at that point of time. And so Naaman, he has a big problem. He has leprosy. There is no cure. And despite of all the greatness that he had, he could do absolutely nothing about this problem that he had. It's kind of like Steve Jobs. Think back a few years. Despite of all his success making Apple what it is today, the moment that he got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, he could do absolutely nothing. Right? His riches could not help him. All the technology in the world could not help him. He was just counting down the days until he finally died. And this is what Naaman is going through. He's a great man with a problem and no solution. The text continues with verse 2. Verse 2 says, "At this time, Aramean raiders had invaded the land of Israel, and among their captives was a young woman who was been given to Naaman's wife as a maid." Verse 3, "One day the girl said to her mistress, 'I wish my master would go to see the prophet in Samaria. He would heal him of his leprosy.'" Right? So far in the story, you have Naaman, the great guy, and then you have this little girl. Who is this little girl? Who is she? She's nobody. You don't even have a name. Right? She's not even given a name in the text. She is totally unknown. She's a captive of war. She's been made a slave, and you don't even know anything else about this girl. This girl is one of the nameless masses that you pass by every single day. She is the Filipino maid on the bus. She's the stranger that you stand beside when you take the MRT. She is the cleaning uncle at the coffee shop that you don't really bat an eye to. She's all of these people. She's unknown. Nobody. But she hears about Naaman's problems. She hears that Naaman has leprosy. And she goes to Naaman's wife. And she tells Naaman's wife, I wish my master would go see the prophet in Samaria. He would heal him of his leprosy. The irony is that greatness had no answer. What was small did. Because Naaman didn't have a solution. But the slave girl did. This unknown little girl had an answer. Go see the prophet in Samaria. It's the small things. Story continues. 2 Kings chapter 5 verse 4. So Naaman told the king what the young girl from Israel had said. Go and visit the prophet. The king of Aram told him, I will send a letter of introduction for you to take to the king of Israel. So Naaman started out carrying as gifts 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. Right? This guy is really traveling. He's traveling in style. So what we find in the text, rather, is that Naaman, he's now humbled himself a little bit. He listens to his wife, which is always a good idea, to listen to your wife. And so he starts to pay attention to this young girl's words. And so he goes to the king of Aram. Tells the king of Aram, I need some permission to go to Israel. I need to go and find a prophet. And so the king of Aram grants him permission to go, and he sets off with a letter of introduction to the king of Israel. Right? And so he starts to travel to Israel. He's bringing with him a lot of money. He's bringing with him a lot of money. He's bringing with him a lot of gifts. And he's basically putting up a sign telling everybody, I'm important. Right? I'm a big deal. I'm powerful. I'm rich. He's coming to Israel to find a solution, but he's bringing with him all his greatness. He's bringing with him all his wealth. He's bringing with him all his power. And he's thinking it's going to be able to do something for him. He's thinking that he needs this. Well, does he need that? We'll find out soon enough.
I need a job.
2 Kings chapter 5 verse 6. The letter to the king of Israel says, with this letter I present my servant Naaman. I want you to heal him of his leprosy. The king of Israel reads the letter. He tears his clothes in dismay and says, am I God that I can give life and take it away? Why is this man asking me to heal someone with leprosy? I can see that he's just trying to pick a fight with me. Right? So you have Naaman. He's made his way to Israel. He's appeared before the king of Israel. But remember, who is he told to find? He's told to find the prophet. Instead, he goes to the king of Israel. Right? So you have the great Naaman, and he's going to find the greatest man in Israel, the king. Why?
He thinks he deserves.
There's an assumption that Naaman is making, isn't it? He's assuming that any kind of great prophet must work for the king. Right? In Naaman's mind, he can't imagine that such a wonder-making prophet would live in the rural areas. He can't imagine that a prophet so great would be a social outcast. He can't imagine that a prophet that is so powerful would be rejected by the king and society because the society has turned its back on God. He's thinking that a significant prophet must be one of the elites. He must be in the king's court. He must be under the king's service. He must be doing big things for the king. And he made a wrong assumption. Because significance is not always found in greatness. Human nature, we make a wrong presumption. Our presumption is that significance can only be found in the presence of greatness. But that's not true. Right? We assume that significance cannot be found in the small things. Significance cannot be found in the obscure things. We think that significance cannot be found in things that are hidden. But it's not true. Lately, I was going through my Instagram feed and I came across a social media post about climate change. And it was a funny post because on one side of the post, you had pasted on that post the young 16-year-old girl called Greta Thunberg. Right? She's the one that went to the UN meeting and then she started railing at the UN leaders. How dare you! You stole my childhood from me! And she started shouting at them. And people thought it was a great speech. Right? People thought that was wonderful, that was fantastic. She's so brave. They want to give her a Nobel Peace Prize award, last I heard. So she's on one side of that social media post. And then on the other side of the social media post, there's this unknown Indian villager. Now he has a name, you can actually look it up, he's a real guy. And for 40 years, he's been on his island, in his village, planting tree by tree, day by day. And for 40 years he's been doing that because he's been trying to fight soil erosion on his island. And to date, he has planted 550 acres of trees. For context, Bishan is just 62 acres. Bishan Park, sorry, it's just 62 acres. This guy has grown a forest by himself over the past 40 years. No one noticed. No one noticed until one journalist went to the island and he found out the truth of what was happening. And the caption of that social media post read, "Pick your representatives wisely." Who did the media say was great? Greta Thunberg. She's everywhere. Whose actions was more significant? The Indian villager. He actually did something. Significance is not always found in greatness. Naaman, he goes to the great king of Israel. But can the king of Israel do anything for Naaman? Can't do a single thing, right? All the king could do was tear his clothes in dismay because he thinks the king of Aram wants to pick a fight with him. And that's why he's asking him to do something that's impossible. Despite of all the greatness of the king of Israel, all the wealth, all the power that he had, he could do absolutely nothing for Naaman. Could not heal him of his leprosy. 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 8, story continues. But when Elijah, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes in dismay, he sent this message to him, "Why are you so upset? Send Naaman to me, and he will learn that there is a true prophet here in Israel." So Elijah hears what the king had done, and he says, "Don't worry about it. Send Naaman to me, so that he can know the truth. There is a true prophet, there is a true God." Let's do a little exercise. Let's compare the king, let's compare the prophet. Where does the king stay? The king stays in the palace at the capital city of Samaria. Right? He stays at 6th Avenue. Where does the prophet stay? The prophet stays in a house somewhere unknown. He probably stays in Woodlands. Unknown.
No, that is was an issue.
What income does the king have? The king has a lot of income, right? He's wealthy. He collects taxes. What kind of income does the prophet have?
What's an income?
Need income, nothing.
Not rich. He's not rich. He's relying on donations from faithful people that believe in God.
He's rich enough.
And I can tell you that's not a rich job. What kind of lifestyle does the king have?
Lavish.
Lavish, luxurious. This guy travels
Every week.
private,
Thursday.
right? Or first class at the minimum. What kind of lifestyle does the prophet have?
BMW bus, MRT walk.
Public transport.
Can't even public transport.
Yeah, maybe just walk.
Simple, humble. If he's going to travel, he's taking Jetstar.
He's gonna take
Bicycle.
a Jetstar. Oh,
What kind of social standing does the king have?
influenza.
He's high, he's powerful, he's influential, he's respected. What kind of social standing does the prophet have? Well, he's low, right? He's worse than a commoner right now because the nation has turned its back on God, and so he's a social outcast. He's the weird guy. He's the one that everybody makes fun of. But who could do something about Naaman's leprosy? The solution was not with the great king. The solution was with the humble prophet. It's the small things. 2 Kings chapter 5, the story continues. Verse 9, So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elijah's house. When Elijah sent a messenger to him with this message, "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River, and when then your skin will be restored and you will be healed of your leprosy." Right, so the great Naaman, he goes to Elijah, he finds Elijah. He's a big deal, and so he's bringing along all his chariots, all his horses, all his wealth, all his servants, all his gifts, everything, right? He's bringing it all, and he goes to Elijah's place, and Elisha does not even come out to greet him. He's too busy playing his Switch. Right? He doesn't even go out to greet him. There's nobody greeting him at the door. He's just left there to wait. When was the last time you attended an event and the VIP waited for all the people to arrive?
Never.
Never happens, right? What would happen would be everybody else waits for the VIP to come. And so what you have here is Elijah, and he's breaking all the proper protocols. Whatever kind of formality that there is supposed to be, Elijah is breaking it. He doesn't care. Even afterwards, Elijah still doesn't come out to greet him. Instead, Elijah, he sends out his servant to go and tell Naaman. The boss says he's busy and he's taking his nap, so just go and wash yourself at the Jordan River 7 times and you'll be fine. He gets a messenger to deliver the word to Naaman. How does Naaman respond? What happens next? 2 Kings chapter 5 verse 11 says, "But Naaman became angry and stalked away. I thought he would certainly come out to meet me. He said, I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of the Lord his God and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus, the Abna and the Pipha better than all the rivers of Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed?" So Naaman turned and went away in a rage. Naaman rage quit. He had a meltdown. Well, at least he nearly rage quit. Because he's thinking to himself, this is totally crazy. Doesn't Elijah know who I am? Doesn't Elisha know who I am? I'm important, I'm big, I am deserving of respect. How can somebody so small treat someone so great this way? And Naaman still does not get it. He still doesn't understand. It's the small things. Thankfully, there are people around Naaman that do understand. And so the text continues, verse 13, "But his officers tried to reason with him and said, 'Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him when he says simply, go and wash and be cured.'" Verse 14, "So Naaman went down to the Jordan River and dipped himself 7 times as the man of God had instructed him, and his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, and he was healed."
Wow.
Notice something about Naaman. Naaman was willing to do the big things.
7-layered.
Right? He was willing to go on the epic quest. He was willing to go and slay the dragon. He's willing to go and climb the highest mountain. He's willing to go and swim across the ocean because he's a great man, and great men do great things. Or so he thinks. Right? He, in his greatness, becomes unwilling to do the small things. Doesn't want to go to the Jordan River, take a bath 7 times.
Because he never showered.
And because of his greatness, because of the way that he is and the disposition that he has, Naaman started to look down on the small things. He started to ignore the small things. And that's really bad, because sometimes the miracle is not in the great things, the miracle lies in the small things. The point is, small things are significant. Small things have meaning. Small things are important. And when I was a young Christian and I started to get more serious with God, I started to want to serve Him. And so I went to my leaders and I asked them, hey, how can I serve God? Like, what can I do to help in this youth group? And I was expecting some kind of response like, you can be on the worship team, or you can become a small group leader, and something like that. I'm expecting someone to say that. Instead, what I got was, you want to serve God? Great. We need someone to stack the chairs. Lay out the chairs for the service and then stack the chairs afterwards. I told them, stack chairs. Sounds not very big. Doesn't seem like such a big deal. But they told me, it's small, but it's significant. It needs to be done. And so my first act of service to God was to lay out the chairs for the service and then stack them and keep them afterwards. And it seems very menial of a task, but over the years I start to understand the wisdom behind that kind of instruction. Because when I look back and I reflect, I realize that it's the small things, or in the small things, that I learned what the heart of service to God really means. I started to learn consistency. I started to learn humility. I learned how to be faithful even when no one was looking. I learned how to do something for God and not for the praise of other people, because no one's going to praise you for stacking chairs. And those are lessons that I learned, and I still carry them with me today. But I learned them doing the small things, never the big things. See, human tendency focuses on the great, and we start to ignore the humble. We want to be like Naaman. We want to be and do the great things, but we don't want to do the small things. We want to have a ripped body. We don't want to go to the gym. We don't want to work out. We don't want to watch our diet. We want to eat that chocolate cake.
You want to drink 2 cups of bubble tea every day.
We want to earn a high income, but we don't want to take the time to learn the skills and to perfect our craft so that we can actually command that kind of income. We want to get good grades, but we don't like our lecturer, and we don't want to attend class, and we don't know what the lecturer is saying, and so we get enraged, and we don't want to listen, and we don't understand. We want people to like us, but we don't want to take the time to actually be with people, to listen to their problems, to get to know them, and to be a part of their lives. We want to have a happy marriage, but we don't want to do the dishes. We don't want to clean the house. We don't want to give our spouse a massage. And I'm preaching to myself. We want to be close to God, but we don't want to take the time to pray, to read our Bibles, and to wait for God to speak. We want to serve God on stage, but we don't want God to deal with us backstage, to change our character, and to allow people that are ahead of us to speak into our lives and tell us our flaws in a way that we can improve. We want to do the big things, but in wanting to do the big things, sometimes we make the mistakes of ignoring the small things, and it's the small things that really do matter. It's the small things that are significant. And the truth is, we ignore and we neglect the small things to our own disadvantage, because sometimes the answer, the solution, the miracle, the key lesson that we need to learn, it's not in the big thing. It's in the small things. You cannot do the big things for God if you're not willing to do the small. Small things are significant. Naaman had to learn the lesson that it's all about the small things. And I want to share with you quickly, for the remainder of the time, 3 simple reasons why small things are significant and why you need to pay attention to them. First, we read Luke chapter 21, verse 1. While Jesus was in the temple, he watched the rich people drop their gifts in the collection box. Then a poor widow came by and dropped in 2 small coins. I tell you the truth, Jesus said, this poor widow has given more than all the rest of them. For they have given a tiny part of their surplus, but she, poor as she is, has given everything she has. The first reason that small things are important is because God notices the small things. Right? We find that Jesus is in the temple and he's watching people go to the offering box and put huge sums of money in. Right? These people are putting a lot of money in. These rich people. And they're putting a lot of money in. But Jesus says absolutely nothing. doesn't commend them, he doesn't praise them, he doesn't say anything about them. But then this poor widow comes along and she drops in 2 small coins. You know how close Jesus has to be to see 2 small coins? To see this go into the offering box? How much attention was Jesus paying as people put in their money into the offering box? How close of attention did Jesus have to be to notice this poor widow put in 2 small coins? And when she did so, Jesus then spoke and he said, this small gift is more significant than all the other gifts that came before, because this gift was given out of a heart that trusts God. God notices the small things. God sees what other people do not see. He sees the hidden acts of kindness that you do to bless people. He sees when you make tiny sacrifices and choices that nobody else realizes so that you can serve and honor God. He sees when you put in the extra effort to prepare a devotional message or to prepare a Sunday school lesson. He sees when you take the extra time out of your devotional, your morning to pray for someone else. God sees the thing that no one else sees. God sees you. And nothing that you do is too insignificant for God to ignore. He sees it all when it's all done with the right heart. And most people, they have no clue about the effort that it takes to prepare a weekly message. A weekly message is not done in an hour. For me, it takes 2 days' work minimum. It takes time to pray, to think, to process, to reflect, and put it down into words. Now, I'm not complaining because I do love what I do and I thank God for His calling on my life. But to be candid and honest with you, sometimes when life gets busy, I get tempted. I get tempted to do a shoddy work. And the devil comes to me and the devil tells me, you only have a small group. What kind of difference is one message going to make anyway? You can just take it easy 1 week. Cut some corners. Nobody will know. Which is true. Even if I cut corners and didn't put in as much effort in my message, you would know. But I don't give in to those thoughts. Why? Number 1, because I love you. And I want to feed you God's word and I want to do the best that I can because I care about you. But number 2, because I know that God sees. And He sees even if I put in 1% of extra effort into that message, it's not so insignificant that God doesn't notice. He sees it all. And so I take those opposing thoughts captive. And I do the best that I can because I know that God sees the small things. He sees what nobody else sees. God notices the small things. Second reason, Zechariah chapter 4, verse 4. Says, but do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begun, to see the plumb line in Zerubbabel's hand. The second reason that you need to care about the small things is because God cares about the small things. Small things are important to God. They're meaningful to God. Right? We just read the text. The text takes place when the Jews, they came back from exile and now they have the great task of rebuilding the temple of God. That was what they were there for. But what you need to pay attention to is the moment of time that God rejoiced. Does the text say God rejoiced when the temple was completed? No, the text does not say that. The text says God rejoiced when God saw the plumb line in Zerubbabel's hands. The plumb line is a measuring instrument, and it's used to measure things before any real work is done. And God sees Zerubbabel take that measuring tape and he starts to measure out the dimensions of the temple, and God says, yes! They've completed step 1. They took measurements. And God is overjoyed. God is excited at the small thing. What's the big deal? Just took out the measuring tape. But it was important to God. He rejoiced over it. God rejoiced at the completion of just one single small step because God cares about the small things. See, sometimes we get the wrong thinking in our hearts. And we start to think, unless I become something, unless I become someone great or I do something great, I do not matter. God does not care about me. That's not true at all. God's not like that. That is us imposing worldly values on God when He is not that at all. God cares about the small things. He doesn't just care about the big things that you do. He cares when you're clicking the PowerPoint for worship. He cares when you lay out chairs for the service. He cares that you are the one that tidies up after everybody else is gone. He cares when you take the time to check on people to see how they're doing. He cares about the small things, and so we should as well. Sometimes we're so fixated on the great things that God has prepared ahead of us, we forget the small things that God has placed right in front of us. The things that He's given us to do now. And they may be small, but they are significant to God. And so they should be significant to us too. And this doesn't come naturally to us. And so we have to train our perspective to see things the right way, so that we can see how it is correct to view small things. Anne has a service on Sunday evenings, right? She comes here and she will start music practice with Jonas at 5 p.m. Jonas plays the piano for her. The difference between Anne and I in terms of our worship practice session is that Anne is musically trained. She knows how to read the notes. She knows how to keep timing correct. And so the moment that she spots Jonas make a mistake, she will correct him. Even if it's just one note played wrongly, even if it's just a second or two of delay because he missed the timing, she will catch that and she will correct that. And then she will make Jonas practice and practice and practice until he gets it correct. Why? Because those things matter. The small things matter. Same thing at the cafe. Anne trains the staff to care about the small things. End of the day, make sure you flip that close sign so that it actually reads close. When you're putting the coffee sauces back in the plates or in the correct piles, make sure they go into the correct pile, right? Red ones on the red pile, yellow ones on the yellow pile. Don't mix them up. And tells them, make sure the cookie is formed correctly. Don't put out a malformed cookie. It's a mutant. It's not allowed. Small things matter. These are not pointless or harsh instructions. These are training to be mindful about the small things because they matter. And trains people to care about the small things because God cares about the small things. Don't neglect, don't despise, don't look down on the small things that you do. Small things are significant. And I think deep down in our hearts, we appreciate people that care about the small things. Aren't you glad that your hairdresser cares about small things?
He clearly didn't.
And you need to change your hairdresser. Aren't you glad that your hairdresser is not texting and cutting at the same time? Aren't you glad that the aircraft engineer cares about the small things? That he is concerned that one tiny screw is missing from the wing of the plane.
Oh, it's okay.
Aren't you glad that the one that cooks your food cares about the small things? And you're not digging your nose at the same time as preparing your meal. We care about the small things. Small things are significant. They're more significant than you think. God cares about them, and so should we. Let's go on. Third reason. Matthew chapter 25, verse 21. The master was full of praise. This is Jesus, he's telling a parable. And he's saying, well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount. It was not a small amount, it was a lot of money. So now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. Right? Of course, you know the parable that Jesus is talking about. This is the parable of the talents. A rich man goes away on a trip and he entrusts his bag of money to all his servants. One servant had 5 bags, one servant had 2 bags, one servant had 1 bag. And so after the trip, the rich man comes back and he goes to settle accounts. And he comes to the one with 5 bags and he finds that, okay, this servant has doubled it, he now has 10 bags, well done. Right? He goes to the one with 2 bags, and the servant has doubled that also, and now he has 4 bags. Very good, well done. And so the master praised them, he rewards them, and he says, because you have been faithful with this small amount, I will give you more. But then you have another servant who has 1 bag, who unfortunately did not do what the rest did. And he took his 1 bag of money and he buried it in the ground. He didn't even put it in the bank so that he could earn a little bit of interest.
Like he treats it.
He didn't bother to do a single thing. What does the master do?
Banish it to the shadow.
Verse 28. Then the master ordered, take the money from this servant and give it to the one with 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they have been given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those that do nothing, even what little that they have will be taken away. And so the master takes away the money from the servant, the wicked servant, and he gives that 1 bag of silver to the one with 10 bags. And so now that guy has 11 bags of silver. The wicked servant is punished. And so you can look at the parable from a negative angle, and we can see that if you are unfaithful with the small things, then even what you have will be taken away. But it's not always good to look at it from a negative point of view, and so let's take a look at the positive side. Because God rewards faithfulness in the small things. When I told Anne what this message was about, just telling her and pitching my idea, she said to me, "You copied my message." Right? And I told her, "No, I didn't. It's totally different. Except for this point. This point was quite copied." Because her message was, ground things lead to grand things. Right? That's what the message is, and that's exactly what this point is about. That when you're faithful with the small things and you're faithful to things on the ground, God will eventually lift you up to do greater things. Ground things lead to grand things. We know that because 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 6 says, when you humble yourself under God's mighty hand, in then due season He will lift you up. But first you have to humble yourself under His hand. Trust Him. Right? Be willing to do the small things. Be faithful in the obscure. And then in due season He lifts you up. God rewards faithfulness in the small things. The way that you do greater things in Christ is that you do the small things in Christ well. Small things are the ones that prepares you to do the greater things. If you're not willing to do the small things, you should not be handling the great things. By my estimation, one of the most reliable and trustworthy people that I know is seated behind that camera. And when I need to get something done, well, I get Eric to do it. Because he is a trustworthy person and he's done quite a bit for the church. But he got to that place because over time he has proven himself to be faithful with the small things that has been requested of him. Is he perfect? No, not by a long shot. Right? Far from perfect. But he was faithful in doing the small things. And the small things showed that he was ready to do the bigger things. And so more and more responsibilities get entrusted to him, even if he doesn't like it sometimes. Like copying out song sheets because I forgot to bring them. But if you can't care for the church in a small way, how can you possibly care about the church in a big way? It doesn't make sense. That's not the way this works. Small things lead to greater things. You're faithful with little, you'll be faithful with much. God rewards the faithfulness of small things. It's all about the small things. Small things are significant. They matter. And they're important. We need to take note of them. And so I'm thinking, as I'm preparing the message and I'm praying and I'm reflecting, that God really does want to speak to two kinds of people today. The first kind is the one that has great dreams, right? And you want to do great things for God. You want to be all that God has called you to be. You want to make a big impact to those people that are around you. And it's not sinful to want to be great in God's kingdom. Remember when the disciples told Jesus about their desire to be great in His kingdom, He did not rebuke them. He didn't say, no, you should desire that. You don't want to be great. No, He didn't say that at all. He didn't rebuke them. He told them the way to become great. The way to become great is to serve all. To go down before you can go up. And if you're that kind of person, then God is reminding you today, don't neglect the small things. Small things are significant. Small things matter. And sometimes you will find that the greatest things as the most humble beginnings. When Jesus came on earth, He did not come as a king. He came as a poor carpenter's son. Small things lead to greater things. Don't ignore the small things. And if you're that kind of person, God might be speaking to you today, telling you, don't ignore the small things. Don't neglect the small things. Don't despise humble beginnings. These things matter. The things that God has placed in your hands right now, they matter to God. And God cares about what you do with them, whether you like them or you like to do them or not. They've been entrusted to you for a purpose. Care about the small things. And maybe God is speaking to another kind of person. He's speaking to the kind of person that has been doing a lot of small things. That you're doing the things that no one else sees. You're doing the things that nobody else knows. And you're wondering to yourself, does this make any kind of difference? Putting in all my time and putting in all my effort to do things that nobody else sees and nobody else knows, is it going to make anything different? Is there going to be any kind of impact? Is the time and effort that I put in actually worth something? And today God is telling you that they do. They matter to God. God sees, God cares. Small things, they are significant to Him. And God is reminding you today, don't despise the small things. Keep being faithful with the small. Keep going, and then in due season, what you sow, you will reap. So I do not know where you stand in terms of whatever you're going through, or the circumstance of life that you are facing right now. But God knows. Take the time to let God speak to your heart.